Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome back to Justice for All Now. I'm your host, Hena Zuberi. And today we're back to discuss the Uyghur genocide. And more importantly, the silence of the Arab world on the oppression of our brothers and sisters in East Turkestan. I'll be joined today by my colleague, Aydin Anwar, and we will be discussing comments made by a well-known figure, Shaykh Habib Ali Jifri, on the Uyghur people and the situation, specifically concerning the Chinese government. Our special guest today is Toqa Badran, and I'm going to introduce Toqa first. Toqa Badran is a recent graduate of Columbia University, where she earned a degree in political science and anthropology, and advocated for the rights of minority students. She'll be returning to the university as a graduate student to study the history and cultures of Muslim society, especially in pre-modernity. Her grassroots organizing has mainly dealt with anti-colonialism and advocating for the rights of the economically, politically, or religiously subjugated people globally. Thank you, Toqa, for joining us today. You and Aydin have put together a response to Habib al Jifri's statements. And Aydin, welcome back.
Thank you.
Is a fellow colleague. She's a Uyghur activist. She's the Justice for All lead on the Save Uyghur campaign and a graduate of Duke University. So Bismillah, I wanted to today talk specifically about, we have been, it's like deafening silence, except for a few tweets here and there. From some, lately a princess in Kuwait, I believe, has spoken up, and that's when Uyghur activists actually reached out to her after her statements on Kashmir and what's happening with Indian Muslims, that we saw a little bit of activity amongst Arab intellectuals and elite on the Uyghur cause. But aside from that, it has been deafening silence. Have you guys heard anything from any government officials or any intellectuals in the Arab world on this issue?
I mean, on my end, I think deafening silence is definitely an apt term to describe it, because it's worse than saying, oh, we don't want to take care of this issue or we don't want to talk on it. Rather, it's just a complete ignoring of it, as if it's not happening. And because no one's talking about it, then the people in those countries also don't know about it. If the governments had said anything at all, at least the people might be spurred to do some research or figure out what's happening on their own. But instead, there's absolutely nothing. So you'll find that many people in the Arab world don't even know that it's happening, who these people are, what's going on. And I think that's even worse.
Aydin, what about you on your end?
Yeah, I mean, I can attest to that. During my first visit to Palestine last June, I was interested to see how many people actually knew about the Uyghur issue, given their current oppression. Because I was talking to these people who were talking on their trauma and like the oppression, the occupation that they're going through, and I was telling them like, hey, you're not alone. Like, you're in our du'as, and like I would say I'm Uyghur, and they'd have no idea what I was talking about. And I would go and kind of explain the situation. They'll be like, oh my God, like, compared to you guys, this is like a Jannah, like we're living in a Jannah. And so I think that the fact that the common people did not know anything, I mean, in addition to the rest of the world, we're not saying the whole world knows and they don't know, but it was saddening to see that. And I think it also revealed how also our common day leaders, their leaders are not speaking about the issue either, even though they are facing a very similar or a similar type of oppression that where we should all be kind of unifying and through like the solidarity and coming together as occupied Muslim peoples.
And I did see some protests, sporadic protests by people who knew about the cause. We had actually a volunteer activist who in Algeria who actually spoke about and wrote editorials about it. And her experience was that whenever she went to speak, even, she's a well-known journalist there, has been writing over there for many, many years and returned back to her homeland. But even her colleagues there were very hesitant to talk about it because of the government's close ties with the Chinese government. And we see this, being repeated, whether it's in Pakistan or it's in African countries. This is repeated again and again, that because of the economic power that China displays in these lands, that the Uyghur cause is not talked about. But when we look at some of these Arab countries, they do not have the same sort of, they're not indebted to the Chinese government in the same manner, right? So that is very difficult to then understand why they're not speaking up. I wanted to hear, where did you guys, Aydin, please lead us through what happened and when did you first hear about, and then so out of nowhere, we get this, a video comes out from one of the most well-known shuyukh in the Arab world with millions of followers. And what does he say? Who is he and what does he say?
So essentially, this video was brought to attention by a couple of friends. Multiple people had reached out to me saying, hey, this is a video of a popular scholar in the Middle East who's made these comments about the Uyghurs that are really problematic, and they themselves were really disturbed by them. And I personally don't know Arabic, but I had someone translate it and walk through the main points. And some of the points that he made were things like only half of Uyghurs are Muslim. And from that comment alone, we realize this is something that needs to be addressed and they needs to be responded to. So, Jo and I, we decided to draft a response and go from there. So with that, it became kind of a lengthy article, but I think it is, alhamdulillah, pretty comprehensive. So for those who are interested, can actually go on muslimmatters.org right now and actually read it. There's links and sources that you can access so that there, beyond this conversation, of course. But we believe that this was something that because Habib Ali has such a large following, especially within the Arab world, we thought we needed to address it and make sure that this is well known, because and this response was well known, so at least people are not being fed Chinese propaganda and ultimately thinking that this is not an issue that they need to be worried about as fellow Muslims. Habib Ali also claimed that this is purely a political concern and not a religious one, and that basically implies that this is an issue that we shouldn't care out of religious concern. And so we and then there's also some other points, including talking about that some other points where he made basically kind of delegitimizing the East Turkestan freedom movement, where he claimed that Uyghurs are only fighting because they don't want America to become they're only fighting because they don't want China to become 2 times stronger than America economically, and that they, that they only care about their freedom movement because of the One Belt One Road initiative, which is, spanning through a lot of East Turkestan, and China is relying on this land for that. But what the problem with that statement is that it delegitimizes decades of history and occupation that we've been going through, and the reason why people are resistant to this occupation in the first place. He even claims that Uyghurs have only been living through oppression for the last 3 to 5 years, which is completely false. And so we kind of just went from there and basically took each of his major claims and refuted it and explained it and with proper facts and anecdotes and so on.
Okay, so let's have that clip pulled up and let's watch it. Let's see what he says with the translation. Because can you put this in perspective? Do you know where he was when he was giving this speech?
So do you have a comment on that?
So it looks to me, I'm not sure if I think it's written in the comment of the video, but I think he's in the Emirates at that point in time. And it looks to me that the audience is, not looks to me, he's speaking Arabic, so everyone in the audience is Arab. And I think it was at a conference where many people come from many different countries. So it's not just an Emirati audience, but different countries, people living in the Emirates who are Egyptian, who are other communities. They've all come to listen to him because, of course, they all know him because, as you said before, he's pretty well known.
Okay, let's listen to the clip. So this would actually be a perfect venue to actually educate people about the Uyghurs and about the crisis and about what is happening. And unfortunately,
and it's interesting because he assumes that the people know something about the Uyghur people, when in reality, I think that many people don't know too much. So his starting question isn't, does anyone know who the Uyghurs are? He says, no. He says, who thinks that the coronavirus or COVID-19 is a punishment for China for what they've done to the Uyghur people? So that already at the very beginning is a hint of bias. And I think most people would be inclined to say, yeah, I mean, it sounds like, you know, I don't know, like that seems like a stretch. That seems like it would be kind of a weird claim to make. So it starts off pretty biased in my opinion, and then he just goes further in kind of building that claim and building that it's not. Of course it's not. How could it be? Why would you think that?
Okay. And so, okay, someone commented the video is in Egypt, it seems, but you guys think it's in, okay, we'll take a look at that.
Well, the people in the audience look pretty Egyptian to me. I'm Egyptian myself, so they look Egyptian. I maybe thought that the audience was Egyptian, but he was in the Emirates, but it could be. All I know is that the way they're wrapping their headscarves looks pretty Egyptian to me.
SubhanAllah. Okay, so while we're getting that up, let's walk us through the article. I know you guys, so Toqa, what was your interest in this? What was your reaction when you first heard it? How did you get in touch with Aydin?
So I've known Aydin for a while. She's a wonderful activist. I follow her closely. And she actually brought this to my attention. She said, a lot of people are telling me that he says some problematic things. Can you listen to this and like let me know what your opinions are? And I listened to it, and my main response was just kind of confusion. These are, you know, just not facts. They're not even close to being facts. So when I heard what he was saying, that, for example, like Aydin was saying earlier, that only half of Uyghurs are Muslim, that's just simply a demographic like falsity. That's just nowhere near correct. So I just continued to watch this video and got more and more confused. And I felt bad almost that everyone in the audience was hearing these things, and then they were accepting them as facts, because why wouldn't they? It's coming from a reputable source. So I showed it to my mom. She was like, wait, I know this Shaykh. Why would he say these things? I'm also confused. Like, they're not true. So we've kind of come to the conclusion that there's no point in trying to figure out why he said these things, but simply trying to educate and give an alternative that is more truthful.
And so you guys had the article translated in Arabic as well for people to share in the Arab world as well. And this is so important, getting the facts. And why do you think both of you are qualified to write this response? I need to hear that, and I think the audience needs to hear this. You know, you're going up against one of the biggest names in the Arab world.
Well, I think a lot of the things that he says were against facts, and I think it's easy to respond when you have facts. So us being Muslim, him saying we're a half Muslim, that can easily, anyone can draft anything with just citing real history and saying, you know, this is not true and this should be corrected. So that it just comes from that. And I don't think either of us were claiming we're scholars or experts, or, you know, we're trying to go up against a member of the ulama. That's itself an iffy move to make, because again, we don't want to seem like we're attacking traditional scholarship or traditional scholars, and we were very careful with the tone that we had throughout the article as well, just to give benefit of the doubt in case he was just misinformed and did not know, because again, we want to make this clear to people that you know, we want the truth just to be heard. We don't want people to think that for example, half of Uyghurs are Muslim, and then to think this is not an issue of our concern. We don't want we should not be having we should not be having this cause be belittled and delegitimized when we have millions of people still lingering in camps and prisons, and they're being subject to the largest surveillance state in the world. And
your own relatives, 93 of them are missing, right?
Yeah, so I have 93 relatives who we deem as missing because we can't even contact them. I don't know how many are alive or are dead. I know there are probably dozens of them in these camps and prisons, probably as forced laborers right now. But the worst thing is I don't even know. Like that's the the worst part about all of this, I have a lot of relatives in the countryside, and they said much of the countryside are now being like totally wiped out. These villages are being destroyed, and so again, like, what does that, what does that say when we hear a popular scholar saying things that are just, for me, like when I heard it, it's obviously painful, and not, I mean, you don't even have to be Uyghur to feel that pain, but it's like the Uyghur issue is one of the issues that are already forgotten by majority of the world, already forgotten by the Muslim world. So to have somebody say that, to then speak on it, but then say things that were completely inaccurate, is, something that needed to be called out on, and in a respectful manner, of course, and to make sure that this mistake isn't made again from other people, and that the correct message is put out to the Muslim world.
And I even noticed that, he had said certain things that can be generalized from just the Uyghur issue to something that affects the entire ummah, and the gravity of it is just incredibly important. For example, he says that this is not a religious issue, this is a political issue. And of course, we know that in Islam, there's no division between the political and the religious. Our religion, our sense of morality, our ethical systems, they drive us to act politically, civically, economically, whatever it may be. So when he says that as Muslims, we have no duty to fight for the Uyghurs, or I don't want to, make too clear of a statement. If he says this isn't a religious issue, then our response in the article indeed was, if it's not religious, then what is it? And even if it's not religious according to this binary that he's drawing, then if it's simply a political issue, do we not still have the duty or the need to fight against this oppression? So our article is like very logical in its approach. It's just a bunch of rebutting right after another. So yeah, I think, yeah.
Let's go through it step by step. So the very first point that he made, he claims that only half of Uyghurs are Muslims. And this is something that you brought up 2 points over here. You brought up the point that maybe he's mistaken about the current population of that region, which the demographic makeup of East Turkestan under the occupation of China. Either he thinks he's talking about that, or take it from here.
So we essentially thought, okay, we're going to give benefit of the doubt, because maybe he thinks, so right now the current demographic in East Turkestan is because of Han Chinese migration since 1949, since 1949 Chinese occupation, we've had scores of settlers come in, and now the population within East Turkestan is highly comprised of Han Chinese settlers. So the most recent statistics is 40%, but we estimate that the number is much higher, because now we actually have scores of Uyghur detainees being migrate or forcibly transferred to parts of mainland China, and also a lot of undocumented Uyghurs are not accounted for in that number. So that number is still, so it's right now, like the official estimate is around 40%, but again, it's a little bit unreliable and it's not exact, but the Han presence is still very large. And so we're thinking, okay, maybe he thought, maybe he heard the statistics and maybe he thought, okay, well, in that case, if it's 40% Chinese, then that means only 60% of them exist, and that therefore 60% of the population is Muslim. So we thought that might have been his way, his line of thinking. But then we also, address the other side of it, is if that wasn't the case, and he did actually say half of Uyghurs are Muslim, then here is the reality, and here is the history, and we went from there. And just to describe now the current day, now China is erasing everything that makes up who we are as Muslims, and and if Islam wasn't a central part of our identity, then why make such overt efforts to erase that part of us? So we're just posing that.
And by making these claims, he commits the same exact deed that China wishes it could do in one step. China wishes that Uyghurs would stop being Muslim, that they would just become model citizens of the Chinese country, or of the Communist Party. And by denying the fact that almost 100% of Uyghurs, like it's the vast majority, are Muslim, then he's just making it even easier for China to do what it's doing.
Okay, I think we should. I think they have the video ready now, so let's watch the video. I'd like some of the audience members are also asking to see where this video. So let's bring that up and get that up, and then we'll just, it helps to put that in perspective too, because this is not something little. This is what I want to remind the audience of, that this is a huge figure in the Muslim world, very respected, beloved here as well as overseas. So for him to, okay. Okay, some people lift up their arms when they're thinking that this might be something from China.
Can we not hear his speech? Or
Yeah, I thought we should be able to hear the.
Also, somebody's asking what was the date of the video. This video was posted on YouTube in early March, I believe, of this year, so 2020.
Okay.
We link the video also in the article, so you can just go through the article.
Yeah, you can look through the article and listen to it as well over there as well. Okay. So, well, we tried twice. So just to give the benefit of the doubt so people can listen to his own words. But let's move on. Okay, so then now what I really, really enjoyed reading from this article, because I mean, I've been doing Uyghur advocacy for a while, and it's always good to learn something new. And I really enjoyed how you all put the historical part of really laying out the lay of the land and how Islam spread in that land, and the influence of Sufi scholars or people who are Ahl Tasawwuf in that area. So can you talk a little bit about that research and then so you say Uyghurs were also historically part of the Shagate Turkic Khanate, which were the rulers of the Mughal dynasty who ruled much of India for over 2 years. This is interesting. So tell us more about that.
So I think Aydin's going to go more into depth on this, but I just wanted to say one thing. I myself, I'm learning Uighur right now, the language of the Uyghur people, and it's so evident for me just while learning it that every other language or main language demographically is present in the Uyghur language. You can see the connectedness of East Turkestan with every other country within the Muslim world. There's Arabic, there's Farsi, there's Urdu, there's it's incredible the net that this language creates between every other Muslim people. So to deny this history is just false, but also heartbreaking, truly.
So we first start off with kind of mentioning how long Islam has been such a prominent religion within East Turkestan. In the article, we talk about how long before Egypt or even the Levant became majority, the Uyghurs in East Turkestan became a Muslim majority societies during the Mamluk era. And much of the Islamization of Central Asia and the Turkic world were credited to the Qarakhanids, who were a group of Turkic tribes who lived in the Uyghur homeland, and they converted to Islam in the 10th century, which is the 4th century Hijri, after our ancestor, our ruler, Sultan Abdul Karim Bora Khan, converted as well. So he basically sparked the Islamization of Central Asia, and since then, much of all of East Turkestan has been, a prominent center for the Muslim world. We have different towns and cities that basically still hold so much of this Islamic heritage. Unfortunately, now it's being destroyed by the Communist Chinese Party. But for example, we have Kashgar, which is essentially considered the jewel of the Silk Road. It was a historical capital of the Qarakhanid Empire, and Kashgar became a prominent center of learning and showcasing the rich Uyghur past. We have Yarkand, which was a particular center of Islamic learning and culture for centuries, and this place had dozens of madrasas until the last decades of the 19th century, before these were also then destroyed by the Qing Empire and by the Chinese party later on. And so we have, and majority of people, all the Muslims within East Turkestan are Sunni. Many, live the Sufi way of life. So we were greatly impacted by the Yasawi order, which then translated into much of the dhikr and communal gatherings that we have in our culture. Unfortunately, those are also being destroyed by the Communist Chinese Party. Those customs and people who engage in such acts are then put into prison for life or executed. A lot of our Sufi shrines have been destroyed. Even the shrine of Imam Jafar Sadik, who is a 8th century scholar and a descendant of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His tomb is not here, by the way. It's in believed to be buried in Medina, but his shrine was also destroyed. You can see that through the satellite imagery. We actually posted in the article if you scroll down. But again, we're the reason why we're highlighting so much of China's destruction of this is to really reveal the importance of these sites and how historically, if it wasn't of such great importance, why would China bother to be raising a lot of these sites? Now they're raising a lot of the mosques and anything that basically sheds light on the Uyghur religious and cultural heritage. Mm-hmm. So we kind of go from there. For those who want like a more detailed description of the history, you guys can just go ahead and read it. The history section is not too long, but we also link it to other sources that you can read to get a fuller picture of the Islamic preservation within East Turkestan. I myself, as an Uyghur, it's even reading and learning this history, it's saddening, and I'm like, even if I were to go there now, I would to try to see and learn about the history, or see the history, I wouldn't be able to see it. So I'm at least grateful that some people have preserved this history through through formal works, and that we're able to access some of this at least nowadays, and to at least talk about it and to mention it and to make it known. And I feel like a lot of this history, again, is not usually part of the narrative when people talk about the East Turkestan issue. Usually we're framed as simply ethnic minorities within China, and then people think we're part of China, or that we're Chinese, and it's really cringeworthy. Here you can see the map of East Turkestan in relation to the rest of Central Asia and a lot of the Turkic world. You can see kind of, by the way, China calls the East Turkestan region the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. If you look at the general map, it would not say East Turkestan because of the occupation. They reject that name. So yeah, I kind of went on a little bit of a tangent, but just reiterating the importance of the history is critical for this narrative, and for a lot of these leaders to be making sure that they share with the rest of the world. Because again, people just simply think we're Chinese and that we're just some ethnic minorities that quote unquote have become radical and need to be controlled. But in reality, we were a nation living under decades of we were a nation living with centuries of independence, and we're then taken over by Chinese occupiers. So I think that's something that needs to really be pressed upon and emphasized while sharing this, and also obviously sharing the importance of East Turkestan in the Islamic world, because again, it's because we lack history like this and lack knowing history like this that we end up having comments like only half of Uyghurs are Muslim being made in the first place.
Exactly, and the fact that like this would be denying the Islamic nature of a country, just like we would never say this about Afghanistan or about Pakistan or Turkmenistan. We would not. Or Uzbekistan, even though they have also been suppressed, is the rest of the Central Asian countries over there who have been living under communist rule, and you can see similarities. And you mentioned this in your article that some people might have stopped practicing. And might not be as devout because of the oppression. And what is your hope when the oppression is lifted? Yes, over here, I wanted to also share. Could you share a little bit about what we're seeing on the screen right now, Toqa?
On the screen right now, as you can see, it's a before and after satellite picture of the Imam Jafar Sadik shrine. So as we all know, he was a scholar, but also a direct descendant of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And as you can see, every structure basically has been demolished, and all there are now are trees. So it kind of speaks for itself. It's like devastating, and it's just really unfortunate that all of this is happening. And I think that had these sites been discussed like with the rest of the world, of course, I don't think it's allowed for countries to just raise thousands of year old buildings or 1,000-year-old buildings without some kind of like discussion about it at least. But because the nature of this razing is a colonial nature, the issue here is an occupation. There's no respect paid whatsoever. China wouldn't raise its own buildings that are this old or of this significant of this significance. But because it's Uyghur, because it's an Uyghur land, because it's of an Islamic nature, that's what justifies it, and that's just awful.
And I do want to point out that this particular site is one of one of the four most important holiest sites in East Turkestan. And so to have something like this to be destroyed, I think is, I mean, we obviously can't see the reactions of those living around this site or the Uyghur people who have, venerated this site. But, you can, just through sharing this with the Muslim world, the general Muslim world, you can kind of sense the kind of outrage that people are facing. And the fact that people in East Turkestan can't even speak up against this or protest against this destruction or say anything against it without being severely punished for that.
The other point that you both of you refuted was the point that that his claim that the question of and we talked about this earlier a little bit, was that the question that the Uyghur oppression is political and not a religious one. And so tell me a little bit about that. How did you guys counter that?
Okay, I'll start. So when I first heard it, my first reaction was I actually agreed with some of it, because we have been, because I think a lot of people think that the concentration camps, they're putting these people into camps and so on because they are Muslim. But we a lot of us Uyghurs were like, no, it's not just that. It's like it's part of a greater occupation, because if this was truly about Islam and only Islam, then we would see Hui Muslims also being subject to the same forms of oppression that Uyghurs are. We'd see Hui Muslims being rounded up into concentration camps as much as we are, and it's subject to the same type of surveillance state as much as we are. But we also, made it clear this is part of so we would make it clear this is part of a territorial issue. It's part of an occupation, and China is using religion as an excuse. So when we address this topic, when we address this claim, we made sure that, but again, there's no binary. We're not going to say it's political and not religious, or religious and not political. And so we try to kind of build that bridge, and Toqa really touched on this earlier, and how there's no binary between the two, and how these two are combined. And again, China is using religion as an excuse to carry out what it's doing under the name of the global war on terror. So which the US launched. So it's like it's all intertwined, and you actually have lots of people who are being oppressed, not because they're actually engaging religion too. There are also a lot of secular Uyghurs out there who are being put into prisons and camps because they were, let's say, teaching the Uyghur language, or they were using WhatsApp or something really arbitrary that has nothing to do with religion. So we wanted to make that clear, but at the same time, that overall claim that it's not a religious concern and it's just purely a political one is also very problematic, in that it's basically calling on the Muslim world to be like, it's not something we need to really worry about as much. This is just something. It almost sounds like he's saying something along the lines of, is this something that is an internal affair within China, and that this is something, and in that China is actually is justified in doing what it's doing because these people are quote unquote potential terrorists or extremists, and so on. So we had to kind of go from there and go and address that. So if Toa, you want to add something more to it, or Hena, I see you.
Yeah, I'm just thinking 5,000 mosques that we know of, and I'm sure the number has risen in the past year, have been demolished. And there's a picture that you guys put in the article of it being demolished. And just that, we're not allowed to go to the mosques in Ramadan. We're sitting at home and can't go to Taraweeh and stuff. So to actually have 5,000 mosques being destroyed in every corner, in every city, and that not be a religious or a political issue, is something that is, it's mind-blowing for anybody to say that, any Muslim to say that, let alone someone of that caliber of scholar. So this is, and that makes you wonder, like, what is the information flow that is going in, and what is coming out. So
I want to say actually an interesting coincidence. Mm-hmm. So today's date, 3 years ago, the Chinese government published a series of rules and regulations surrounding Islamic practice directly. And I'd just like to quote some of them. They're not directly in the article, but they're obviously important to this argument. So, for example, they said that when you pray, you can only say Surah Al-Fatiha and Juz Amma, so only the last juz of the Quran. So, of course, it's gone more stringent recently, and I'm sure nowadays you're not allowed to pray at all. But 3 years ago, this was the state of the situation. So instead of saying the regular adhan, you have to say, we are all children of our great country twice, China is the greatest, come to prayer, and then pray for the prosperity of our great country, China. So obviously this is directly sacrilegious, it's blasphemous, and it's not allowed according to our faith. So this was the state 3 years ago. So imagine the degree of oppression that they're being faced now. And imagine how angry we should be as Muslims that this is happening to our faith. This isn't happening just like politically because of colonization or because of money, because of China-America relationships. This is happening to our faith and to our brothers and sisters. It's clear to me.
Yeah, and definitely. And then he further makes the claim that the reason people are fighting for East Turkestan is because they don't want China to build the so-called New Silk Road and become twice as strong as America economically. And this is a trope that we've heard many times in our activism. But just the fact that the history and Aydin, I remember the first time I came to your home and interviewed your father, and he showed me this picture of the Declaration of Independence of the Islamic Republic of East Turkestan from 1933, which was so powerful. And just the people standing. And honestly, I'll tell you that. And then even despite having known Uyghur people and despite having, have friends who are in California. But I remember when I walked into Aydin's house and I first met her father, I swear, I was like, he could have been like one of my husband's family members, right? My husband's family has some, they have some Turkic, some Afghan, like he looks a little bit different from other Pakistanis. And I was kind of shocked because the image that we in the media has also been put down is that Uyghurs look Chinese, and this was something that I started doing research and I found out that this was a trick that was being used by the Chinese government, that whenever Uyghurs were mentioned in any media anywhere, that pictures of Hui Muslims would be used instead of Muslims. And so when you actually meet a Uyghur person, their features are so different that you almost take a step back and you're like, your whole framework is shattered. So yes, and that photo of the turbans and the robes and everything is and this was just 1933, so 80 years ago, 90 years ago, and not even 100 years ago that this was. And so to deny that history, and this is the history, this is the land of Bukhara, the land of one of the greatest muhaddis, Imam Bukhari. So to take that away from the people is quite incredible.
Can I add something?
Yes.
China actually goes as far as to claim that we're actually not Turkic. They say there's actually an article on their Chinese state website that claims that the Uyghurs are not Turkic, are not from Turks. That's what they claim. They're like, we're not from Turkic descent, or no, we're not a Turkic descendant. I don't even know what that means. But they're also claiming that we're basically back in time, we were all the same people, but that we eventually just broke off into different ethnicities, and then we became our own thing. So China actually claims that, and they say we've always been a part of China. And they call us China calls us their long lost relatives. They claim that we're related ethnically, and that we just kind of became our own thing. And now they're actually trying to, and because they know they're making this stuff up, that's why they're so eager in trying to basically homogenize us with the rest of China. They're forcing us to become Han Chinese, so we start looking like them, so we start speaking like them, so we start living like them. So I mean, now you even have it's going as far as forcing Uyghur women to marry ethnic Han Chinese men, so their kids eventually become like half Chinese, and their grandkids becomes 75%, eventually that whole identity gets lost. So,
that's a step in genocide.
Yeah.
That's a step in genocide.
Exactly.
This is why rape is also used as a tool of genocide, is so the next generation is not carried on forward, or they're diluted.
Right.
Their genes are diluted.
Uh,
So I wanted to now really discuss, because the people who may be watching this, some of them might be new and they might come to this because of the article. And we talk about action items about the Uyghur cause, but we. So welcome to any new people who are listening and have never heard about this, and don't know what to do now that they have read this, they've learned about it. What do you do next?
So do you want to go?
Sure. I mean, at the end of our article, we have a number of like action items that you can do, and they include talking to your universities and ensuring that, for example, in studying Uyghurs, if you want to study Uyghurs, you don't have to go to the Chinese Studies Department or the East Asian Studies Department, because that's just simply a geographic, it's not true. Just because someone's like, for example, you would never put a study of Morocco with a study of Spain just because they're geographically close to each other, because like ontologically they're different, historically they're different, linguistically they're different, religiously they're different, and so on. So doing that, making sure that Uyghur students are accepted into Muslim communities, despite anything, just include them in our understanding of the Islamic world, and make sure that there are scholarships, that there are funds that allow Uyghur students who may not have the resources, or are refugees, or are outside of their home country now due to what's going on there, that they're able to go to university and study there. Just kind of, I know at my university, we try to hold an event to talk about the Chinese Communist Party's human rights mistakes that it's made in the past, and every single event was canceled due to a lack of space. Just kind of mysteriously, it didn't work out, and this is directly the cause of Chinese pressure onto academia. And I would like to believe that academia is kind of something that is independent of like these political issues, that knowledge is free to everyone, but unfortunately that's not always the case. So what we have to ensure is that we're talking about this, that we're discussing this, that we're studying this, that we're making room for our Uyghur brothers and sisters to come despite the soft power of the Chinese Communist Party. So those are just a few things. I don't know if Aydin wants to add on.
Aydin?
To add on to that, this is going to be a really cliche one, but it's still a very, very important one, is to continue raising awareness. But when I say raise awareness, I mean raise awareness from proper sources. Read the East Turkestani narrative. Don't read something that was written by the Chinese state. Obviously, read upon what Uyghurs are talking about, what we're saying, the history that what we're putting out there. If you want to learn the history, for example, you can read part of this article, but there are also so many sources out there that you can find online, written by scholars. So reading up on that and learning about it, and really talking about it, to be honest. I think now, we have making it into a day-to-day conversation topic, like talk about it at dinner table. So many of us, we talk about a lot of issues in our community, including that of Palestine, of Syria, and other Muslim oppressed populations. But sometimes we often leave out one of the other really major nations that are being so oppressed. And I think, but I think again, people only know so little. Maybe they've heard concentration camps, they've heard Uyghurs, they think we're Chinese. They know some of the small, they think they know, I mean, they've heard of some small things from the media, but again, they don't know the fuller narrative. They don't know that this is an occupation. They don't know that we're a Turkic people. So I think number one is educating yourself first. For those who are watching, maybe you're first exposed to this issue, and that's great. I would say after this, really do your research and read up on it, and use your social media platforms and use your circles to spread awareness and talk about it. And I'm reiterating this because, again, as an Uyghur, it's still not shocking for me to find people who don't know when I say I'm Uyghur. They're just like, they'll look at me blankly. Sometimes they'll look at me as if they know what they're talking about because they feel embarrassed. Mm-hmm. But that's exactly what China has been working towards. They've been working towards the Uyghur narrative from being completely blocked off. And granted, the Uyghur diaspora is actually still very small. We only have several thousand Uyghur diaspora here in the United States. So it's hard to find an Uyghur person. I don't blame anyone, but it's still sad though. Even if we haven't met someone of a different population in our lives, we still oftentimes we still have heard of it, we still know it, or we've still seen it on TV, or maybe. But what we see, even if what we see on TV is not really, really accurate into who we are as a people. So I would say first educating yourself, and then using your platform to raise awareness. If you're a university student, organize or events on your campus, have different departments co-sponsor it so that the event reaches far circles, and assess your university's relationship with China as well, because, and we kind of emphasize this in the article, a lot of universities out there have things like Chinese or Confucius institutes on campus that are actually funded by the Communist Chinese Party, and so that enables these institutes to enact their soft power on campuses. And so oftentimes, if you try to, like Toa mentioned, if you try to organize an event on the Uyghur people, there most likely will be backlash, or that specific institute will not co-sponsor or will not want to comment on it. You might have a lot of Chinese international students speaking out and saying this is quote unquote Western propaganda, and that this is biased against China, or that it's offensive to China. And so stuff like that has happened, and we've seen it with our personal eyes. I know, I don't know if I should name it, but there was one school where I was invited to speak, and they actually cancel the panel. So like it's sad, and it's and I don't think the real reason's ever kind of openly set out, but it's with that with the pressure from these Chinese bodies, whether it be through people on campus or institutes on campus, that are making sure that this issue is silenced. So I would say so in regards to what you can do to that, I would say speak out against that, call them out. Really, honestly, naming and shaming can do something, like making sure that this narrative is really brought out there. And then in addition to that, there are also universities out there that have partnerships with entities that are directly complicit in the genocide. So, for example, we had MIT that was partnered with 3 tech AI companies for a while. Essentially, these tech companies, it includes it includes SenseTime and iFlyTech. iFlyTech is essentially in charge of voice recognition technology. SenseTime is in charge of facial recognition technology, and MIT basically helped these companies prosper. And so you have these elite bodies, these elite institutions that are directly helping with the incarceration of millions of innocent people, most of whom are practicing Muslims and are innocent. And so we had a campaign to basically call on MIT to stop what they're doing, really make this into an issue that make this into an issue that is prominent on their campus, and an issue of human rights. MIT, imagine being like an elite university and then being tied to one of the worst human rights abuses in the century, like being tied to a genocide. I don't think any university would want to have that branding or have that name. And even if they know that, that's why we have to make it known to other people, so that their image is we ensure that their image is is truly shown in that regard. So I would, with a quick update on MIT, though, they recently decided to cut ties with iFlyTech, one of the companies, which is great news on our part. We're still pushing for them to cut ties with SenseTime and completely cut ties with Huawei if they haven't already done so. So these are just some examples of things to keep in mind while you're assessing your university's relationship with China. So their relationship could be a little bit more covert or overt, but you can also do that research. And I assure you that even if you don't have a China or Confucius Institute on your campus, you can talk to the East Asian departments, talk to professors, make sure that this is an issue that is learned. Is learned about on your university. Talk about opening up a Central Asian department where the issue of East Turkestan is talked about. And even if the school is not so fast in opening up such a department, then at least talk to the East Asian ones and be like, okay, if we're going to talk about the issue of China, and then only talk about China proper, while erasing the occupation that China has carried out towards East Turkestan and Tibet, for example, then this is an issue. And it also, if China then claims, or if these departments then claim, oh, these parts of China or East Turkestan is not considered a part of China, culturally and linguistically, we shouldn't even be talking about it, then that itself acknowledges the fact that East Turkestan is not part of China. It should not even be part of the narrative of China. Unfortunately, it has to be because we are living under that kind of oppression and occupation at the moment. But just making sure that this is something that's talked about. I know I've taken multiple classes on China at my university, and it was so sad to see like the curriculum and what was being talked about, the issues that China are facing, and there are so many issues that China is enduring right now, but you would rarely see. Maybe you'd have one slim topic about they would call it Xinjiang or like the concentration camps or whatnot, but it would be such a topic that was just be touched upon slightly. There would be no emphasis on it, and I think that was for me to be in that class and to see that is quite scary, and it's saddening to see that. And it's like, oh, you have a full-fledged genocide happening. And then you have no one talking about it, or it's kind of just like a topic that we've kind of put to the side. People are claiming that it's maybe exaggerated, or this is just a project of the U.S. government that's trying to spread their U.S. propaganda because they're in a trade war with China. All these things have take place, and my response to that is like let's take away from the U.S. versus China. Let's just listen to what the oppressed people are talking about. What are the Uyghur people? What are their voices? What are they saying? Let's listen to their stories and take out the surrounding factors away from it just for a moment, so we understand that we're not just spreading lies for the sake of, just for our ego or whatever. It's no one's gonna want to wake up in the middle of the day and be like, okay, today I'm gonna just make up a list of ways I got tortured in a concentration camp and talk about it. Because we've heard stuff like that where people who talk about how they were tortured in a concentration camp, they were released, and they were talking. People claim that they were deliberate liars. For some reason, I just can't wrap my head around that kind of response.
So Toqa, what would you suggest, like as an Egyptian American, what would you say to your community on this topic, especially concerning this? The Shaykh was Egyptian as well, and you understand your community better than others.
Yeah, he was in Egypt. He's not Egyptian though, so.
He's Yemeni.
Yeah, he's something else. I'm not entirely sure. I can ask, but it's in the article. I don't remember off the top of my head. But I think what I would recommend for my community is what I would recommend to any non-Uyghur person or any non-student. Like, let's say in your university, you're not in university or you're not a student. I mean, the simplest thing you can do is just like boycott Chinese goods. The same way that you wouldn't buy hummus that says made in Israel on it, there's absolutely no reason why you would buy any electronics, any clothing, any food products. Right, so he's Yemeni, I've just been informed. So the Shaykh is Yemeni. But just like you wouldn't buy any Israeli food products or clothing products, electronics, don't do that with China as well. So in fact, it's even more important that we don't do this because it's recently been made very clear, like it's factual, completely factual, that Uyghur labor, forced labor, is being used for the production of many of the goods that we consume, like daily, weekly, monthly, like be it Nike or like different electronics that many of us have, or Adidas, I think, is also tied to it. So I think the best way to do this is not to just boycott these specific brands, but just boycott China in generally, any of their products, to put pressure on them as a country that takes pride or has historically been very well known for its like high production capacity, to completely boycott these products. And Muslims we have an incredibly high purchasing power collectively, obviously globally, of course. Just one of a huge group demographically. It's almost pointless for me to say that. But if we all just collectively decided to not purchase goods, it would only benefit Uyghur people, but it would benefit you as well to increase your independence from Chinese products, increase your country's independence from Chinese products. So that's just one thing that I think globally, any community, my community, non-students generally, any non-Uyghur person should be able to do relatively easily, to their own benefit and to the benefit of Uyghurs as well.
Thank you both for being with us here today. This is, and your hard work. I know you guys took a long time to research this piece. You spent time really, and your tone was very respectful. It wasn't, and I really admire that, because a lot of times when people try to address scholars, they often at times start hurling abuses or just cancel culture, and this is not what you were trying to do over here. You made a conscious effort to actually correct the wrong claims and the wrong statements and educate. And hopefully this, even if it does not educate him, it will educate some of the people who may be followers, who may be may come to read it just because of his name. So this is, thank you so much for that. And I know you had someone translate, Imam Abdul Jabbar, translated in Arabic. It's also on the Muslim Matters website. So those of you who speak Arabic and would like to share it with the Arab speaking world, we encourage you to do this. This is imperative that we have material about this genocide in Arabic spread around the world, because the change, the pressure and the change people have to realize that this is the land of Bukhari Sharif. This is like, I can't say it in any other way as a Muslim, to rid that entire region of Islam is egregious, and we have to really, really work and hard to educate people. For those of you who are regular listeners and who live in the United States, please go to www.saveuighur.org, SAVEUIGHUR.org/Congress. We have been working on this bill for a whole year. You guys all know this, led by the Uyghur Human Rights Project. And this bill is now at the stage where it's passed House, it passed Senate. It passed Senate, then it went to House, it passed House, but was made stronger. Now the Senate has come back with a version that the House and Senate agree on, and we need every senator in the United States to pass this unanimously. It's Senate Bill 178. So please go and call your senators right now, write to them, demand a meeting with them, and ask for them, if they have not co-sponsored Senate Bill 178, that they need the Uyghur Act, they need to do that as soon as possible. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you tomorrow. Assalamu alaikum.